When you watch Ken Loach's film, The Wind That Shakes the Barley, you might find yourself assuming that the title is just a nice, simple metaphor for the Irish landscape, but it actually holds a lot more meaning behind it than just a nice collection of words. There's been a few videos on the World Wide Web done about discussing the accuracy of the events the movie discusses, but I haven't really crossed any that talks about the music. It's done a fairly good job about the music now, except for one bit, which I leave it up to yous to decide whether it was creative liberties or an actual blunder. But anyway, to get started, there's no better place than to let's get talking about the title. If you've guessed it from the intro by now, it's not a metaphor for the Irish countryside. It's a song that's not actually about the Irish War of Independence that the movie's set in. Let me explain. The film brings us into a cycle, into a loop that we're going to talk about later, with Cillian Murphy, who plays Damien O'Donovan, a young, educated doctor from Cork. When we first meet him in 1920, he is the absolute opposite of a fighter. He's a man of science with a one-way ticket to London, all set for a prestigious career. He wants absolutely no part in his brother Teddy's local IRA column, seeing their fight against the huge British Empire as complete madness. So what could possibly turn a doctor, a man meant to heal, into a guerrilla fighter? Well, it was witnessing the pure viciousness of the British forces up close. The movie opens with the lads playing a bit of hurling. Then after the match, they all head back home and they're basically ambushed by the Black and Tans. No public gatherings are allowed. That includes hurling. The lads are lined up and forced to state their names, and most of them reluctantly cooperate. Except for one, Micheál O'Sullivan. He states his name in Irish instead of English, and this obviously upsets the Black and Tans. After a bit of shouting and then a few fists are thrown, they tie him up in the chicken coop and kill him there and then. Damien at this point is shocked by it, but his logic stands strong that he was killed for not saying his name in English. His death was just so pointless, but it doesn't change his mind to stay. He still plans to go to London. And the final moment here comes at the train station just as he's about to leave for good. He watches British soldiers violently assault a train driver and a guard who refused to let them board with their weapons. A nod to the real-life railway strike of 1920. Here Damien sees ordinary people standing up to the British soldiers, and at this point he knows that he can't go to London. He gives up on his London dream and is sworn into the IRA, stepping onto a dark and violent path. And as he makes this choice, we hear the first haunting notes of the song Oro Sé bhFiann. As the recruits drill in the Cork mountains, that melody plays softly on a flute in the background, which I think is a nice hint at what's to come later in the movie. Now, a quick one on Oro Sé bhFiann and its history. It's fairly complicated, as the conflict itself. It started life way back in the 1740s as a Jacobite song, a plea for Bonnie Prince Charlie to come back with foreign armies and drive out the invaders. But then, in the early 1900s, Padraig Pearse gets his hands on it. He swaps out the foreign prince for Granuaile, our own Grace O'Malley, the famous pirate queen. His version was all about the Irish fighting for themselves, and it became this fast, triumphant march sung by the volunteers in 1916 and after. So why doesn't the film use the triumphant version here? There is a scene where the lads are marching and it is sung at a more brisk tempo. But throughout the movie, Ken Loach takes the song and slows it right down, making it heavy and mournful played in the background. He takes all the speed and glory out of it, which I think is an excellent choice. For a start, right? For what's happening in the scenes, it would make absolutely no sense to play a quicker tune. For the scenes, for example, with the troops moving quietly against the beautiful Irish landscape, you need something slower to set the atmosphere. They could have chosen a different song, but the symbolism behind Oro Sé bhFiann as a way to hint that as they are practicing, the fighting is still going on. The fighting still has to happen. Also, it shows just how versatile the melody is and that it can actually be used in a different way. Moving on now, there is a pretty fun part in the movie as well, where another song is featured, the Wild Rover. And as we know, it's a well-known drinking song. But the lads are trying to steal weapons from a stash in the area, and one lad is planting a bomb, or at least what looks like a bomb, but it just won't light. He's spotted, but instead of panicking and running, he pretends that he's just a drunk stumbling around in the street, singing Wild Rover, continuing on with the distraction. I spent all my money on whiskey and beer. They end up raiding the place and getting the weapons in the end. Maybe they just could have honestly just skipped on the bomb part and just sang Wild Rover from the beginning. Now we'll leave that one there and we'll move on because there's another one that's mentioned. the soldier song, Amhrán Bhíonn. And probably here is where we have our only musical trip-ups in the movie that I could catch anyway. Later on in the movie, after the bomb Wild Rover scene, there's a scene where the IRA volunteers are locked up. Teddy is pulled out and tortured. If you've seen the movie, you know the scene. I don't know about you, right, but anything got to do with teeth or fingernails just creeps me out. I could barely even look. And the sound effects as well, they made me flinch every time. It was horrific, but a great scene. But yeah, I think it was when Teddy was being tortured so that he'd give up the weapon stashes here, right? The lads in the back cells started singing the soldier song, Amhrán Bhíonn. In Irish now, in Irish. Now here might be the little blunder. Or was it creative liberties? I'll let you decide. This song wasn't translated into Irish until 1923 by Liam O'Rinn, so they wouldn't have been singing it in Irish here at this time. They would have actually been singing it in English. On a bit of a side note now, another movie that I'd love to get talking about is Sinners. Actually, there's such a cool theme behind the music here. If you'd like me to go over that one, do let me know. But in both movies anyway, you can argue that decisions were made that could be seen as prioritizing creativity and image, rather than the accuracy of the history. Either way though, I think we can debate that this error, all in all, it doesn't take away from the movie, it doesn't take much away. We get the idea. It's a movie, it's not supposed to be a documentary. Its primary goal is to entertain and to generally inform. But I think the proper history buffs would have given Ken Loach a gold star if he had the lads sing the soldier song in English. But let's go back a little bit, right? While the Wild Rover and the soldier song features alongside Oro Sé bhFiann, being used throughout the movie as the theme of the movie. Let's get back to the interesting part here. The title, the 1798 Rebellion Ballad, or Lament. The title of the movie is borrowed from a much older ballad, written back in the 1860s by a Limerick man named Robert Dwyer Joyce. Can you guess what it's called? Yes, you guessed it right, I hope. It's called The Wind That Shakes the Barley. And this song had absolutely nothing to do with the War of Independence. Sure, for obvious reasons, it was written 60 years before it. It was actually about the 1798 rebellion in Wexford. To get your head around it all, you have to understand who the rebels of 1798 were. They had a different name for them now. They were known as Croppies, because of their short hair, and this was a nod to the French revolutionaries. They were mostly a peasant army, without much in the way of supplies. So for food on the march, what did they have? Just a handful of barley that they'd stuff in their pockets to chew on. When these poorly armed rebels were cut down by British forces, there were no proper burials. They were thrown into shallow, unmarked mass graves known locally as croppy holes. And then, come the spring of 1799, something strange and honestly a little bit eerie started to happen across the battlefields. That barley, the seeds still in the pockets of the dead men, began to sprout, growing right out of the ground, fed by the earth and the bodies of the fallen. Just imagine it. Families couldn't get headstones, and they didn't even really need it. To find their husbands and sons, they just had to walk through the fields and look for these lonely patches of green and gold shaking in the wind. For Irish nationalists, you can see how powerful a symbol like this became. The British could kill the rebels, but the fight for freedom literally just grew out of the ground every spring. So when Ken Loach and Paul Laverty, his screenwriter, picked that title, let's forget about them trying to sell you a lovely looking postcard of Ireland. They were pointing directly at this tragic repeating cycle, where one generation of idealists is planted in the soil, only for the same struggle to sprout all over again. Now, the song is featured in the movie, so it is. Funnily enough, not as much as Oro Sé bhFiann, but it's still there. In this scene here at Mícheál's funeral, it's being sung as a lament. Remember the symbolism behind the barley and the pockets of those fallen in 1798. Mícheál connects directly to those from 120 years before. And so I said, the mountain glen. You can kill the rebel, but the fight for freedom will just go on. And you could argue it gained momentum. But what is the song about anyway? Let's have a little talk about that. The song is from the viewpoint of a young rebel torn between two loves. His old love is his sweetheart, his quiet, peaceful life. The new love is Ireland herself, calling on him to sacrifice his personal happiness for his country's freedom. He knows it will be agony to leave his girl, but he says that it's harder still to bear the shame of foreign chains around us. So the young man in the song makes his choice. He declares that he'll seek the mountain glen and join the brave United Men. And who were these United Men? They were the Society of United Irishmen, founded up in Belfast in 1791. They were started by Presbyterian reformers like Wolfe Tone, and at first they were a political movement. But they soon gave up on a corrupt parliament and aimed for something bigger. A democratic republic built on a union of all Irish people, Protestants, Catholics, dissenters. The idea was a union to break the weight of English influence for good. In the countryside, they joined up with the Catholic Defenders, a secret society that had grown out of land disputes. By tapping into the ordinary man's anger over rent and taxes, they managed to turn local scraps into a national struggle for voting rights and complete separation from Britain. By 1798, with martial law in place and men being flogged and arrested, the United Irishman had no choice left but to take up arms. Now, in the ballad, the young rebel makes his choice with a heavy heart, but his transformation into a hardened fighter is forced on him by a tragedy. Just as he's saying final goodbye to his sweetheart, a shot rings out from the woods. A stray British bullet hits her, and she dies right there in his arms. That single moment changes everything for him. His grief turns into a cold, hard desire for revenge. He buries her and then rushes off to wreak vengeance on the foe. This burning need for payback is what drives him to the battlefield, where he says he has taken blood for blood without remorse, at a place called Owlert Hollow. Owlert Hollow was the site of a real battle on the 27th of May, 1798. The event that kicked off the Wexford Rebellion. A local priest, Father John Murphy, gathered a band of peasants on Owlert Hill. Armed with heavy pikes, they ambushed and wiped out a force of the notoriously cruel North Cork militia. This stunning victory led to the capture of Wexford town and a brief, hopeful Republic of Wexford. But it didn't last. The rebels were ultimately crushed at Vinegar Hill by a huge British army, who then unleashed a campaign of merciless terror across the country. The man in the song, the narrator, he survives the fighting, but he's lost absolutely everything. His love is dead, and he's left to wander by her unmarked grave. And this is the same exact tragic pattern the film follows. Just as the 1798 rebellion is forced to fight, so is Damien. After executing Chris in the mountains as well, he just can't turn back. Just as the rebels' love is destroyed by a stray bullet, Damien's relationship with Sinead is ultimately shattered by the violence of the war, which we see in the end. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the endings, so if you haven't seen it and you do want to watch it, skip ahead. I've left a timestamp there. But remember that barley growing from the graves of 1798, and the title? It's a haunting forecast for how the film ends. The cycle of violence turns in on itself during the Civil War. In the end, when Damien is captured after a shootout, he's confronted by Teddy, his brother, who is begging him to give up the guns so he can go back and be with Sinead and get on with his life. But Damien refuses and says that he refuses to sell out like his brother.
I'm not going to sell out.
When all is said and done, Teddy can barely look at him and walks out of the cell. The next day, the next morning even, Damien is walked out to the yard, tied to a post and executed by a firing squad. A firing squad commanded by his own brother, Teddy. Just as the 1798 rebels had died and were buried, with the barley sprouting from their pockets every spring, Damien's execution goes full circle on the title of the movie. Basically, with his death, his ideology will remain for decades to come, and as we all know, the War of Independence in Ireland was not the end of the fighting. But that was a bit heavy. I'll end on something lighter and something not a lot of people know. The surprising thing about Damien now, it's not shown in the movie, but before he decided to stay in Ireland to fight, he had actually caused a lot of chaos in Birmingham. And somehow after his death, he went on to build the atomic bomb and then star in Batman movies. He's surely lived one hell of a life. It's a bad joke, I'm really sorry about that, I couldn't resist. Cillian Murphy is just such a legend of an actor. But look, could I ask you for a huge favour? If you enjoyed the video, could you please leave a like before you head on your way? It would really help out the video an absolute ton. Just that simple click tells YouTube that it was worth watching. If you feel like you learned something worthwhile today, or even if I maybe inspired you to go and watch or rewatch The Wind That Shakes the Barley, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Even share with us as well what your favourite Cillian Murphy movie is and why is it Oppenheimer. But a huge thanks to each and every one of you for making it this far. You're all absolutely class. I hope this video gave a bit of insight into the music within the movie. As I mentioned, there's a lot of talk about the events and the accuracy. not so much the music, and I personally really enjoyed the connection between the ballad and the movie title. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. If you have watched it, I highly recommend rewatching it. Also, like I said briefly earlier on, if you'd like me to have a look at the music from the movie Sinners, let me know, because I do have my own theory from watching it a while back. Could be an interesting one to show how the music evolved in the Appalachians, or Appalachia. What's the proper correct pronunciation, by the way? The internet seems fairly divided on it, and some of you pointed it out before. But anyway, before I finish up, a huge shout out to our channel members on YouTube and on Patreon. Here's your names up on screen now. Thanks so much for all your continued support. It means so much, and it really helps keep these videos coming. A warm welcome as well to all our new members. Doherty1251, Dennis McDermott 647, Kelly and Dean, Jack Walsh 826, and Not Really Doing Stuff 747. Another great name there, by the way. That's basically me every weekend. Thanks a million for joining. Glad to have yous all here. If you'd like to join them and help support more videos like this, head on over to Patreon, or you can click the join button down below, or check out the links in the description for more info. But look, I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you all have a great week ahead. Slán go fóill, cheers.